we need to review some things we've already talked about this year. Um, Primarily number lines and types of numbers. So the first thing I want you to remember is that number lines can be vertical or they can be horizontal. And we've already discussed that you can actually connect two number lines, one vertical and one horizontal, to create a coordinate plane. Now, earlier last semester, we did actually work in quadrant 1 and we plotted points on the using the x and the y axis. So we worked in this region. By the end of this week, though, we're going to know how to plot points on all 4 of those quadrants. So this is why we're reviewing number lines, because number lines are very important for that. Okay, to plot points on a number line, we need to know the different types of numbers. So we have 0, we have whole numbers, natural numbers, which are the counting numbers you first began learning as a small child, integer, rational numbers, irrational numbers. Okay, so the first types of numbers that you learned were natural numbers. So on a number line, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they go on forever. And as you move to the right, they do increase in value. When you first began counting, you did not know about fractions or decimals, so counting numbers do not include fractions or decimals. Then we learn the idea of 0. So if you add 0 to the natural counting numbers, these are called whole numbers, and they're all positive, and they all go on infinitely to the right forever, increasing in value again as they move to the right. There are no fractions and decimals as whole numbers. Now, this year we have been focusing on the fact that number lines don't just go all the way to the right forever, they go all the way to the left forever. So on the left side of the 0, you would start with the opposite of the whole number 1 in -1, then the opposite of whole number 2, -2. So you start with -1, -2, -3, -4. Now the same thing is true, though, that anything on the right has more value. So as you move to the right, the values increase, which mean that -1 has a higher value than -9 would have. So if you go to the left, the values decrease forever and ever and ever. That's important to remember. So even though it seems like the numbers are becoming larger, they're really actually becoming smaller in value because these are negative values. So these are called integers. 0, all of the whole numbers, and all of the opposites of whole numbers are integers. Now, but that's not all numbers. So in between, you can see this is the number 0, and this is the number 1. So in between 0 and 1, there are an infinite number of decimals, an infinite number of fractions. Now, if a decimal can be written as a fraction, those are called rational numbers. So if you can write a number as a being divided by b, which is a fraction, that's called a rational number. There are some decimals that will go on forever and their patterns do not repeat. Those are called irrational numbers because you cannot write those as fractions. And those do exist, and they go on. They are in between the numbers 0 and 1 as well, potentially. But these are called rational numbers. So here's another example of rational numbers. So if you have between the whole number 1 and the whole number 3, you've got all of these mixed numbers. All of these can also be written as mixed numbers with decimals as well. So all of these numbers, there's an infinite number of numbers in between each whole number. A lot of stuff. Okay. Now, ultimately, though, we learned this year that there are different categories of numbers, but most all of the numbers qualify as rational numbers. So all of the counting natural numbers can be written as fractions. So they're within the rational number box. But natural numbers are also part of the whole numbers, but they whole numbers include the number 0. And then integers, whole numbers are integers, but integers also include the opposites of whole numbers, which are negatives, so integers can be positive or negative. Integers, though, however, cannot be decimals or fractions exclusively, and those would be part of the larger rational number set. Okay, so that's kind of a general overview of number lines and types of numbers.